I'm not proud of how scared I was back then. I was just an intern, the kind of kid who still double checks his badge before tapping in, who sits straighter when a manager walks past, who pretends to understand spreadsheets he's opening for the first time. I thought the worst thing that could happen to me was messing up a report or sending an email to the wrong person. I had no idea how far people in that building were willing to go to protect themselves. If I'd known, I wouldn't have walked into that conference room. I wouldn't have stood there long enough to hear what I heard. But I did, and that moment changed everything. When I first started the internship, my boss seemed fine. A little chaotic, maybe. The type who wore expensive shoes but never tied them, drank energy drinks at 9 a.m., and always had one more thing for me to do, right as I was packing up. But he smiled a lot. He cracked jokes. He acted like he wanted to mentor me. That's how people like him operate. A layer of charm so you don't look too closely at what's underneath. Our department handled project budgets. Nothing glamorous. Tracking invoices, updating allocations, pushing numbers between accounts. But it was stable, predictable. And for a kid trying to break into corporate finance, it felt like a lucky break. My parents told everyone in the family about my big office job. I didn't tell them I was really just the guy who printed things and filled in cells. It started with small things, missing attachments, invoices forwarded to weird emails with no explanation, a vendor's name showing up in places it shouldn't. Once my boss asked me to clean up his report, but the numbers didn't match what the system showed. When I asked, he waved it off. Systems aren't perfect, he said. Manual adjustments keep things moving. I tried to believe him. I really did. You don't want to be the intern who questions the guy who signs your evaluation. But then the adjustments kept happening. I noticed that a particular contractor, a small firm we barely used, was receiving huge allocations from a project that didn't need outside help. Hundreds of thousands moved to them in increments that didn't make sense. And every time I tried to trace the paperwork back, the trail broke right at my boss's desk. One Tuesday evening, I stayed late to finish a reconciliation he needed by morning. The office was quiet, that half-dead silence where even the AC sounds loud. I went to print something and realized the conference room lights were still on. I almost turned them off. I wish I had. But when I pushed the door open, I heard voices. My boss's voice, low, tight, not the easygoing tone he used with everyone else, and another voice, deeper, unfamiliar, the contractor. They didn't see me. I was still behind the frosted part of the glass. But I saw the table, papers spread out, a laptop open to what looked like our project portal, a number on the screen I'd literally spent all day trying to reconcile. 287,400. My boss tapped the screen with a pen. This is the last transfer. After this, it needs to look clean. The contractor shook his head. There's still the buffer. You said we'd get the buffer. My boss looked around the room like someone might be listening. I felt my lungs freeze. He leaned in. The buffer comes later. This is the part we can move without triggering the review. My fingers loosened on the door handle. It almost slipped. I didn't understand everything in that moment, but I understood enough. Money was being moved where it shouldn't be, and they were doing it deliberately, not mistakes, not system quirks, a plan. I backed away quietly, step by step, until I reached the hallway. I didn't breathe until I was at my desk again. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them to make it stop. 10 minutes later, my boss walked out of the conference room, saw my lights still on, and froze for half a second too long. Then he smiled. That same friendly smile he used with new hires. Burning the midnight oil, he said. Good work ethic. He walked past me, but his eyes lingered on my screen, my hands, my expression. He was checking whether I'd heard, whether I knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. This is the last transfer. After this, it needs to look clean. I replayed it over and over, trying to fit it into some benign explanation, but nothing fit. There was no scenario where that sentence meant anything good. The next morning, he was waiting at my desk before I even sat down. He asked casually if I'd been anywhere near the conference rooms last night. My throat closed. I lied. No, I just worked at my desk. He smiled again. Perfect. Keep it that way. I realized then that he wasn't asking. He was warning. And for the first time since joining that company, I felt genuinely unsafe. I only wish that had been the end of it. The thing about fear is that it doesn't stay pure for long. It starts as this cold, sharp feeling in your chest. But if you live with it day after day, it curdles into something else. Irritation, resentment, a low, constant hum of anger you don't know where to put. The day after he asked where I'd been, my boss switched tones. No more, how's the internship going, man? No more, you're picking this up fast. Instead, it was, you closed that file wrong, even though I hadn't. You need to be more careful with versioning, even when the mistake trace clearly showed his login. You're mixing up vendor codes, when I had literally followed his written instructions. At first, I thought I was just under a microscope because he was stressed. Project deadlines, quarter end, all that. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to believe this was just a rough patch. But then I started seeing my name. We used a shared notes section in our project tool. Little comments attached to line items or invoices. Usually boring stuff. Paid $412. Need updated W9. Clarify scope. That week, comments started appearing like, ask intern to correct, intern miscoded, intern needs additional training. All on entries I hadn't touched. The first time I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. By the fourth or fifth time, I realized it was a pattern. Anything messy, anything that didn't reconcile cleanly, suddenly belonged to me. But that was just the beginning. The contractor kept popping up. Not in person this time, but in the numbers. Their invoices came in oddly formatted. Rushed, always marked urgent. The amounts didn't fit the actual work logged in the project tracker. They'd bill for 120 hours of consulting in a week, where their team had only attended a single 1-hour call. And yet, the approvals sailed through. The approval chain was supposed to route through 3 people: project manager, department head, finance controller. On these payments, the project manager's sign-off was always a quick one-line, as discussed, with no backup. The department head, my boss, approved within minutes every time. The controller's approval came stamped in later, but something about those timestamps bothered me. They were too neat, too clean, as if they'd been queued and pushed through in a batch rather than reviewed. I mentioned it once, lightly, like it was just a detail I didn't understand. Hey, I noticed the contractor's hours don't really match the time logs. Should we... He cut me off. Your scope is data entry, not auditing. Enter what you see, not what you think. The way he said think made it sound like a threat. After that, he started copying me on emails that made my skin crawl. Messages to the controller hinting that the intern is still learning, apologies for any temporary mess. Notes to the project manager saying, he mixed up a few lines, I've cleaned it up. All while I was triple-checking everything I touched. He was building a story, and I was the villain in it. The real slap in the face came on a Friday during our check-in. It was supposed to be a 15-minute weekly touch base. It turned into something else. He closed the door, sat down across from me, and steepled his fingers like some low-budget movie boss. So, he started, I've noticed you've been poking around a bit. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? In the system, looking at approvals that aren't your assignments, clicking through invoices that aren't in your queue. He tilted his head. Curious kid, huh? I was just trying to understand how everything flows, I said, to learn the structure. He smiled without any warmth. Here's the structure you need to understand. If you touch something, you're tied to it. That's how accountability works here. He let that sink in for a beat. And if something goes wrong, he added softly, people will look at the lowest rung first. That's not personal. That's just gravity. There it was, not even subtle. He was telling me that if his little money shuffle ever came under scrutiny, I'd be the first name they reached for. Not because I did anything, but because I was convenient. Something in me snapped sideways that day. The fear didn't go away, but it stopped being alone. It had company now. Anger. I went back to my desk, opened the project file, and for the first time, I didn't just do what he told me. I watched. I watched how the contractor's invoices came in always a day before a big internal review, when everyone was distracted. I watched how my boss corrected certain lines after I'd entered them, reclassifying expenses to codes that made no sense. I watched which projects he siphoned from, the ones with huge budgets and vague scopes, the kind that could hide leaks for months. And then one afternoon, I saw something that changed the temperature in my body. An email thread. I wasn't supposed to see it. It was buried in a forwarded chain that accidentally included the prior conversation. He'd sent me a "please update this ASAP" note with a PDF attached. Nothing unusual. But when I scrolled down to find the original request, I saw the messages between him and the contractor. "Need to move the remaining $150K this month," the contractor had written. "Our side is ready." My boss replied, "We'll shift it under additional testing on Project Orion. Intern is handling entries. Easy to blame in case of questions." Easy to blame. That was the phrase. Not "we'll correct it," not "we'll document it." Just easy to blame. He hadn't even bothered to disguise it. He'd written it in plain language, like it was no big deal, like I was just a piece on his board. I sat there staring at that line, scrolling up and down to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. My ears were ringing. I checked the recipients. Just him and the contractor. No one else copied. No oversight. No safeguards. He'd forwarded the thread to me, but he'd trimmed the earlier messages, or so he thought. The version he sent stopped conveniently above that line, but email systems are messy, and the full history was still there if you expanded it. My hands stopped shaking. For the first time since this started, I felt something close to control. Not power, I wasn't that naive, but leverage, a tiny corner of the truth that wasn't just in my head. Proof that this wasn't paranoia. Proof that I was being set up, deliberately by someone who thought I was too small to notice. That night, I didn't go straight home. I stayed in the empty office, lights low, the hum of the building settling around me. I exported the email thread. I saved the invoices. I took screenshots of the approval timestamps. I didn't send them to anyone. I didn't print them. I just put them somewhere nobody else had access to. For the first time in weeks, I slept without waking up every hour. I wasn't safe, not yet, but I wasn't helpless anymore either. I didn't go to the CFO immediately. Nobody does. He wasn't the kind of man you approached with, "Hey, I think something weird is happening." People spoke to him the way they spoke to a judge, careful, precise, terrified of wasting his time. He didn't smile. He didn't make small talk. His presence in a room felt like pressure. But I needed someone above my boss, someone who couldn't be manipulated with jokes or charm or fake mentorship. I didn't plan anything bold. I didn't march into his office with printed evidence. What I did was small, almost nothing. The kind of thing an intern might say without meaning anything. I caught him in the break room the next Monday morning. He was pouring coffee, reading something on his tablet, expression like stone. I stood a few feet away, waiting for my tea water, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When he glanced in my direction, I said it quietly, casually, like it wasn't life-altering. "Sir, I think one of our project budgets has some discrepancies that don't make sense." I expected him to shrug it off or tell me to talk to my manager. Instead, he set the tablet down. "Which project?" he asked. My mouth went dry. "Orion." The way he lifted his eyes to me, not angry, not surprised, just sharply focused, made my skin tighten. "What kind of discrepancies?" he asked. "I don't know enough to label them," I said, which was true. "But the numbers don't match the activity. and some invoices look strange. He studied me for a long moment. Too long. Long enough for me to wonder if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Then he said, "Come to my office in 10 minutes. He didn't ask if I had time. He didn't ask if my manager needed me. He just gave an instruction and left the room, like the conversation meant nothing to him. But it meant everything to me. I spent the next 10 minutes trying not to vomit. When I stepped into his office, he gestured for me to sit. He didn't look impatient. He didn't look suspicious. He looked like a man preparing to dismantle a problem from the inside. "Tell me what you saw," he said. "Not what you think. Not why are you looking. Just what you saw." So I told him the safe version, the numbers that didn't match, the invoices with odd hours, the approvals that seemed too fast. I didn't say the words fraud or scheme or kickback. I didn't mention the email thread. I didn't confess that I heard a conversation in a conference room that I definitely should not have been near. I said just enough to point his attention in the right direction. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he looked down at his screen, typed something, then said, "Do not discuss this with anyone. Continue working as normal." He didn't thank me. He didn't reassure me. He just dismissed me with a nod. I walked out feeling both stupid and terrified. Maybe he'd do nothing. Maybe I'd just signed my internship death certificate. Maybe my boss would find out I'd talked to him. Maybe. But that was the panic talking, and panic is loud. Real life is quieter. 2 hours later, something shifted in the office. You could feel it before you could identify it, like static in the air. People typing slower, doors closing more softly. The project manager for Orion walked past my desk looking pale. Then my boss emerged from a meeting room with the CFO. My boss was smiling, but it was the wrong smile. Too tight, too forced. Sweat dark at the collarbones. They weren't talking. They weren't even facing each other. They walked side by side in total silence, like two people escorting a bomb. The CFO disappeared into his office. My boss disappeared into his. 5 minutes later, he slammed his door so hard the glass rattled. The project manager started calling people into huddles. Someone from internal audit showed up, unannounced. I kept my head down. Around noon, my boss came to my desk. He leaned in close, smiled like a man trying not to snap a pencil in half. "You doing okay today?" I nodded. "Good," he said softly. "You know, it's important to be loyal, especially when things get noisy around here." His hand landed on the back of my chair, light but not friendly. "And if someone decides to wander outside their lane," he added, "there are consequences. Always." I looked up at him, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid, because an hour earlier I had received an unexpected calendar invite from CFO. Subject, "Please stay in the building today. Do not leave early." That was it. No explanation, no warmth. But it told me everything I needed to know. He believed me. He was preparing something, and someone far above my pay grade, was about to pay for what they'd done. I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. My boss hovered a moment longer, waiting for me to fold, to apologize, to explain myself. Instead, I turned back to my screen and said, "I need to finish the allocations for Q2. He walked away with a twitch in his jaw. By late afternoon, IT showed up. They moved fast, heads down, badges clipped differently from regular staff. They walked straight past my boss's office and into the project manager's, carrying sealed equipment bags. Through the glass wall, I saw the controller join them, looking like he'd swallowed a battery. Then another director arrived. Something was happening, and it wasn't small. At 4:15, I felt a presence beside my desk. The CFO. He didn't speak. He didn't touch my shoulder. He didn't even look at me for more than half a second. He just said quietly, "Stay close." 2 words, but inside them was a promise. The storm was about to break, and I wasn't the one standing in the wrong place. He didn't need to say more. The CFO walked ahead, and I followed him down the hallway, trying to look like I wasn't part of anything. My boss saw us pass. He stood up halfway, like he was going to say something, then sat down again when the CFO didn't even acknowledge him. 2 minutes later, the CFO walked into conference room 4, the big one with glass walls and the long table where only senior leadership ever sat. Through the glass, I saw directors filing in. Internal audit, legal, operations, HR. Not frantic, not hurried, coordinated, controlled, like a surgical team preparing the table. My boss wasn't invited. He stood outside his office pretending to look at his phone, but he kept glancing toward the conference room, waiting, trying to guess what was happening. He didn't have to wait long. Legal walked to his doorway. "Mark, we need you to join us." His shoulders stiffened, but he smiled. He actually smiled, and straightened his shirt like this was a routine budget review. He shot a look at me as he passed, something between warning and accusation, but I wasn't part of his world anymore. They closed the door behind him. Frosted glass. Silence. The meeting lasted longer than I expected. People went in, people came out, people whispered to the CFO and slid him documents in sealed folders. Every few minutes, someone from IT arrived with another device. Laptop, work phone, tablet. None of them were mine. I kept working or pretending to. My hands moved, but I didn't see the numbers. All I heard was the faint murmur behind the glass. An hour passed. Then the door opened. My boss stepped out first. His face looked wrong. Not angry. Not scared. Hollow. Like a man who had just realized the ground beneath him wasn't ground at all, just a thin sheet of ice. Behind him, the CFO followed with a folder under his arm. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He was simply done. My boss started speaking, but the CFO cut him off with a quiet, "HR will escort you." 2 security officers stepped forward. Not dramatic, not rough, just firm. My boss's eyes darted around the office, searching for someone to blame, someone to latch onto, someone to drag down with him. He looked at the project manager, at the controller, at me, and then finally he realized there was no one left on his side. They walked him to his office. He went in, packed nothing, he wasn't allowed to, and walked out with just his phone and his wallet. His badge was taken at the elevator. No scenes, no shouting, no last-minute excuses, just consequences. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. When the elevator doors closed, the CFO turned toward me. "Come with me." I followed him back to his office, heart pounding. He closed the door, sat down, and opened the folder. Inside was a neatly printed stack of documents. Transaction trails, invoice timestamps, approval logs, email headers, evidence, real evidence gathered properly, not the messy screenshots I'd saved in fear. He tapped one page. "You were right to bring this forward." I swallowed. "I didn't bring much forward, You brought enough," he said. "You pointed us in the correct direction. We traced the rest." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. He looked at me for a long moment. Not intimidating this time, just measuring. "Most interns don't notice details like this," he said, "and even fewer have the sense to speak up when something feels wrong." He closed the folder. "We'll need someone to help rebuild oversight on these projects. Someone thorough. Someone who doesn't ignore red flags." A pause. "If you're interested, I can extend your internship into a full-time junior analyst role." I thought I misheard him. "Full-time?" I asked. "If you want it," he said simply. "The offer is yours." There was no ceremony, no handshake, just a quiet promise that my life wasn't going to implode. In fact, it was about to improve. I nodded. "Yes, I want it." "Good." He stood up, signaling the conversation was done. "Take the rest of the day. Things will be noisy here for a while." But inside me, something finally went quiet. I left the building in a daze, not from fear, but from the absence of it. The air outside felt different, thicker, realer. I walked slowly, letting the tension drain out of my shoulders, one muscle at a time. The next morning I learned the rest. The contractor had been cooperative, very cooperative. Turns out people become extremely honest when legal gives them two options: return all the money or face a criminal investigation. They chose the first option quickly. My boss wasn't so lucky. He'd left a digital footprint so sloppy it was practically a confession, and he'd tried to delete things, which only made it easier for IT to prove intent. By noon, everyone in the office knew he was gone for good. Some whispered that he'd been escorted out. Others said the CFO personally shut down his access. Someone claimed he'd tried to blame me, and the CFO shut him down with a single sentence: "We have the logs." I didn't correct anyone. I didn't add to the story. I didn't take credit. Justice doesn't need narration. That weekend I sat on my apartment balcony with a cheap mug of coffee and watched the sky turn orange. No drama, no adrenaline, just quiet. A quiet that felt earned. I didn't become a hero. I didn't take down a criminal mastermind. I just did one simple thing. I didn't let myself become the fall guy. And that was enough. When I showed up Monday as an actual employee, not an intern, the CFO passed me in the hallway. He didn't smile. He didn't stop. He just said, "Good morning," in a tone that for him probably counted as praise. It was the most satisfying moment of my professional life. Because sometimes karma isn't loud. Sometimes it's not dramatic. Sometimes it's just a door closing behind the person who thought they'd never be caught, and another door opening quietly for the person who refused to be crushed under them. And this time, that second door was mine.